pricing at Clay sits in finance, and it's very analytical. I would say we work on both product pricing and deal desk at the same time, and maybe this is a little different from how companies are traditionally structured. A big reason is we're a usage-based company. For every new feature that we launch, a lot of them are actually priced in credits. So you don't have to make a purchase decision as we launch new features. As long as you're an existing customer, you have credits, you can just go ahead and try it. I would say education is really hard. It is pretty painful as a PLG company to scale and move too fast and transition to SLG if you don't get some of these things right. So we're very careful at Clay here to make sure that we have a very coherent product and pricing strategy across these motions. We don't pass on all our cloud service costs to our customers today because we know how to manage it, we know how to optimize it. And I think it's going to be the same over time with AI.
Hello, I'm Ariella Bitram.
And I'm Vinay Seshadri.
This is Thank You for Vibe Pricing,
a new ChargeBee series dedicated to team scaling AI monetization.
For this episode, we sat down with Zona Zhang, who leads an exceptional pricing and monetization team at Clay, the data enrichment platform that has become essential for go-to-market teams everywhere. I'm just blown away by how deeply tied to value their AI credits-based pricing model is, while monitoring unit economics front and center.
Right? They literally have engineers looking at AI P&L dashboards alongside unit economics on a daily basis. Not to mention the fact that they think about pricing before they build every single feature. At Clay, the pricing function sits inside finance, and it's amazing how some of these frontier teams think about transparent flow of data and information, so every function can make better decisions every day.
Absolutely. And I loved how transparent they've been with their pricing changes and the reasoning behind them over the years. That's surely another thing worth emulating.
Oh, and we have to talk about how they've deliberately differentiated their enterprise pricing from the get-go. Even her general sense of what it takes to get PLG and SLG just right together, based on her lessons from Asana, where she worked previously, is really instructive. All right, let's dive right in. Thank you so much for doing this. Welcome.
Hi, Vinay. Hi, Ariella.
Hi.
Nice to be here.
Thank you.
All right. So to get us started, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your career path so far. It looks like you've operated as a PM at the intersection of product and pricing, seeing product-led growth up close at Asana first, and then now leading all things monetization at Clay. So tell us a little bit about how you landed up where doing what you're doing at Clay, and it'll be really helpful to also learn a little bit about how the pricing function is structured in Clay, the reasons behind that.
Yeah, of course. So I started my career in investment banking, classic. It was really cool to sort of learn the fundamentals of business and work with really cool companies and leaders in the industry. And then I moved on to Asana relatively quickly in my career, worked on analytics as well as growth managing over there. Afterwards, joined a startup, was the third employee at the company outside of the founders. We scaled to about 25 people, and after that joined Clay. I learned about Clay because I was using Clay as a customer, and I just loved the tool, and the product really spoke to me. And kind of just knocked on the door to Varun and Kareem, and they graciously offered me a job, and that's where I am 2 years later.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I would say if I was a poli-sci major in college, I studied economics, so I was intrinsically interested in, how incentives works and how economics works. I didn't really think I would be working on pricing, but I think it sort of just gradually led me here. At Clay, the function is very pricing at Clay sits in finance, and it's very analytical. I would say we work on both product pricing and deal desk at the same time. And maybe this is a little different from how companies are traditionally structured. A big reason is we're a usage-based company. So pricing and unit economics are pretty important and core to the business. And finance is a very hands-on partner across every team and strategies. We also want to have a very coherent strategy between SLG and PLG. I think coming from Asana, I had a lot of learnings around it is pretty painful as a PLG company to scale and move too fast and like transition to SLG if you don't get some of these things right. So we're very careful at Clay here to make sure that we have like a very coherent product and pricing strategy across these motions.
Perfect.
Wow.
You actually covered a lot of the questions that we had while discussing this conversation as well. Ariella?
Yeah, it's always fascinating to see where the pricing function sits in the context for that. But if we move to something that Clay really was among the earliest to deploy, which is this usage credit-based pricing model. Clay's co-founder, Varun Anand, even noted how it came almost like at a shock to customers in the early days because they were so used to the seat-based pricing model that we've seen in the sales tech space. So I'm curious to know if you can explain how you all define credits as a currency for buying different data points in different actions. And also, what is the hardest part of mapping a credit to a different unit of value? Love getting right into it.
Yeah, of course. So I'll start with like how we define Clay as a currency. I would say it's most analogous to when you're like buying a prepaid phone card or you're signing up for a game and you're like buying this currency so then you can buy any equipments or outfits in that game. So a core value prop for Clay is we're the platform that you can buy anything, like any data. And the benefit is really for the long tail of self-serve customers to try data before they commit to like a year-long contract, 100K plus volume. So that means a currency is actually crucial to the business model here because that is the single value metric that enables all these try and buy behaviors on the product. To your second question, right, like what is the hardest part to educating people about the currency and like describing the value of each units? I would say education is really hard, and we've observed people coming to the pricing page, and I would say most of them have no idea how many credits they need. And that's why we have a reverse trial. And we also have these feature-based plan tiers. So these are providing guidance for users to get started somewhere. And the key is really to get you into the product first so you can experience yourself. You can understand how much you can do with Clay and what data points you need. And we're being super transparent in the product, right? Like when you try a feature, when you try a data point, it is very clearly how much it costs you. So over the 14-day reverse trial, you should have a pretty good idea in terms of what's the volume you need before you pay.
Great. I think you briefly touched upon the product itself and how you had to shape the product experience to take that education forward into the product experience at every touch point as well, right? You also previously spoke about how you need to get the PLG experience right before you're able to like then scale it in the SLG pricing as well. So what others, I've seen those credits, how much each credit, how much each feature costs. I've seen in terms of credits, I've seen that show up in the product. Have there been any other changes to how you build product? Do designers think about currency? Do engineers think about the currency? Is it more part of the vocabulary of product teams? I'm just super curious about that.
Yeah, it's like a core language that we use within every team of the company. So So when we're like developing a new feature, the first decision is like, oh, is this like a feature gate or is this something we can price in the product? And a lot of time we err towards the latter because that's the most flexible way for the customer. And our principle is really everyone should come in and try and see how great Clay is. So when we build a new integration or a new feature, as long as it's an existing module of usage, right? Like we're not creating a completely new product or a new sense of using Clay, then we lean towards pricing it with credits. So the user doesn't have to make a purchase decision until they've tried. And that also is a very easy way for existing customers to try Clay.
That's very cool. how often do you hear, the pricing decision is one of the first decisions you make before building a feature? That's really cool.
Yeah.
I've also noticed that Asana is among the defining PLG stories of the past decade, and figuring out monetization clearly played a key role in how they grew over the years, right? Clay, interestingly, has had the opposite take on seats that Asana had, and is undoubtedly the defining PLG story of this decade. You want fewer and fewer people using Clay to drive efficiencies at scale. Now, what is, in your experience, what has been absolutely distinct, but also similar about the role that monetization enacts in Clay's PLG motion?
Yeah, I think the biggest distinction is Clay is a usage-based model. So scalability and unit economics are really important here. That's why we have like a heavier emphasis on finance than I think in a traditional PLG motion. It probably only sits with product, because you're only thinking about how to get people to upgrade, how to improve your monetization services. But at Clay, it's really more about getting things right from day one. So then over time, as the customers scale, we both win, right? Like the customer think it's a fair pricing, and the cost grows proportionally with the value that they're getting. And for us, we're not breaking our unit economics after scaling. So that's maybe the key difference for monetization at Clay.
Awesome.
I can talk about the similarity too, if there's no follow-up questions. Yeah. I think the similarity is sort of the good old, I think the good old PLG playbook still applies here.
Yeah.
You always want to reduce friction in any part of the buyer journey. And on top of that, I think being generous and fair with your customer goes a long way. So I have a couple examples, right? For friction, both Asana and Clay have free ungated trials, so you don't need to put down a credit card. And that's like a huge emphasis of pushing people to experience the product, and the product can speak for itself. And also in both tools, we decide to default people to the highest self-serve tier in the trial experience instead of the lowest. So you can really just try everything you need. I think Clay probably takes it a little further through a couple different strategies. One is we actually front 2,000 credits for you to test all the data as well. So on top of the features, you actually also experience the quality of the data on Clay. And something we just discussed is for every new feature that we launch, a lot of them are actually priced in credits. So you don't have to make a purchase decision as we launch new features. As long as you're an existing customer, you have credits, you can just go ahead and try it. So I think all of these are very consistent with the existing PLG playbook.
Very cool.
Yeah, amazing. One thing you mentioned, and it's how important transparency is for your team. Clay publishes notes on its pricing evolution. This is something that it's rare. We've seen it a little bit more, but I wish even more companies will do something like this. In the latest edition, published, I think it was around mid-2024, you announced two things that are very interesting, credit rollovers and mid-cycle top-ups. This was, again, something that you implemented without much market precedent. I would love to know, how did you arrive to the core thesis behind these changes? And now that I think it's been around 18 months, how do those changes reflect in the key metrics and goals you had wanted to impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So rollover was one of the most frequently requested features by customers even before I joined. It was literally like the first pricing project that I worked on. I think intuitively as a team, we understand it makes sense for the customer. And the goal is to provide flexibility in the pricing model without breaking the business. So we had a hypothesis that a lot of churns in the self-serve segment were actually from episodic users who are prospecting for a month and maybe they're on vacation for another month, or they have like a low volume season where they don't want to pay for credits that they're not going to use. And we validated this by looking at the restart rate. We actually have a very meaningful restart rate on churned customers who will just like go out for 1 or 2 months and then come back to the platform. So the goal is really to make sure that for customers who are continuously seeing the value of Clay, we're giving them an opportunity to come back and continue to enjoy the product. So it's like consistent with the philosophy, the PLG philosophy, where you want to be generous, you want to develop goodwill, and the sense of fairness is really important to retain customers over time.
Wow, that's brilliant. You were able to expand the values of that PLG motion into the full customer experience. It's really interesting. I have one last question, and what I think it's a fascinating topic of usage credit. For many usage-based models, credit potentially too, there's a behavioral threshold where customers start pacing themselves as they near their entitled limits, however that will look. Some have called this like the taximeter feeling. Have you observed this within Clay's customer base? And how do you design around it, whether it's communications or product cues and pricing structure itself?
Yeah. So I'd say for self-serve and enterprise customer, they tend to behave differently. For self-serve customers, that's exactly why we also shipped top-up as part of that pricing change. You don't want people to feel they are enjoying your product, they're loving it, they're growing, and all of a sudden they have to stop because they ran out of credits. That's the worst experience ever. So we try to make it really seamless and easy, but at the same time, making very clear that you understand what you're getting into. I think there are a lot of debates around, should we just automatically grow your usage and then charge you in arrears? That's what, a lot of data warehouses do, or like a lot of products that have the pay-go model opts into that. But for our customers, what we observe is a lot of self-serve customers are very cost sensitive and they want to be in full control of how much they spend on Clay. So that's why our top-up model is actually very intentional. Like, you will prepay for the credits that you plan to use and you get to control exactly how many credits you buy. But at the same time, there is enough flexibility that you don't have to upgrade to the next tier or buy a new plan when you run out of credits. For enterprise customers, we take a different approach. They don't like to be surprised, and they want to do a good job scoping how many credits they need, and it better be accurate. So our team invests a lot in the pre-sales process of really understand the use cases and the volume that we're looking at for customers. We sometimes run like a 1-month POC to validate some of these assumptions. And obviously, enterprise customers have a very strong support team that monitors their usage. We have an internal and external usage dashboard for enterprise customers that help provide information on how well you're pacing on usage. And when you're like pacing meaningfully, that's great. We work with you to renew your contract at a lower unit cost. So it should be a seamless experience, and you should be able to have these conversations way before you're running out of credits.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Doubling down on that conversation around enterprise pricing and how that's evolved to be different from the PLG pricing, there's this fascinating interview where Varun spoke about the need to differentiate it. We'd love to get like a behind-the-scenes look into how that conversation went down, what the internal conversations were. And you've also previously alluded to, unit economics, working closely with finance, doing the analysis with them. But could you speak to, how exactly finance is involved in these pricing decisions and how you get sales leadership on board with, PLG versus enterprise pricing as well? That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I might forget the second part of your question. So I'm going to start with the first question is why is it important to differentiate pricing strategies when we roll out the sales-led motion, right?
That's right. And what role exactly finance and sales leadership plays? How do you get them on board with that PLG leading up to enterprise kind of a motion?
Yeah. So maybe I'll share a bit on the thinking and what we experimented with the enterprise pricing, and then I can follow up with how what finance played and sales leadership played in it.
Sure.
So when we launched the enterprise product, it was very clear to us that the enterprise customers are getting a much higher value out of the product, right? Like every lead generated for enterprise means it's likely a clear value story of how much CAC you're saving and how much LTV you're gaining from potentially converting this lead. Versus for self-serve, a lot of it is I'm just going to do a cold outbound, or I'm just going to build a list and see what I can do with this list. So the value story is a lot more clear and it's like a known concept for enterprise customers. And then on the cost side, it also just costs us more to support enterprise product. We have a growth strategist team that spent a lot of time with our customers to advise on the best growth strategy implementing Clay. So the initial idea is, okay, well, there's the credit. We'll just charge the same amount. And on top of that, we will slap on a platform fee for enterprise customers. What happened is the customers understand that there is a higher cost, but it doesn't necessarily explain the value of Clay through a platform fee. And it also doesn't scale very well with usage. So what happens is once you hit procurement with the enterprise customer, and this is probably the biggest learning in PLG to SLG, is like procurement starts to become involved. It's not just like you have your champion, you have your user, and then you complete your sales. So in front of procurement team, it's very easy to get knocked down if you have a black box platform fee. People will hear a lot of like, oh, we don't need this feature, that feature from your enterprise offering, so why don't you give me a 50% discount on the platform fee? Versus we switched gears. We're like, let's just do a bundled credit cost where each credit costs a premium compared to the self-serve product. And it immediately shifts the conversation with procurement because now it becomes, okay, there's a trade-off between volume and pricing, right? If you want better price, you can commit at a higher volume, and we can work with your team to figure out how much volume you need and why it is valuable for the use cases that you're building for. So that just completely changed narrative for us and made our pricing a lot more robust for enterprise.
That's fascinating. And how did you bring the committee with finance and sales leadership to make this decision? Because one of the key challenges always going from PLG to SLG is also, okay, how much of enterprise sales is PLG going to kind of cannibalize, or the other way around as well? So how do you make them work for each other versus cannibalizing each other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the short answer is we had a head of sales and maybe like 2 sales reps at the time when we were trying to figure out enterprise pricing, and we did not have a finance team. So it was me, Varun, and our head of sales, Everett, the 3 of us, like sitting in a room discussing, okay, like this deal failed because people really knocked down our platform fee. How can we change narrative? So it's super fast iteration. We literally just talk to a ton of prospects, change our talk track, figure out what is the best way to sell the value of Clay. And I think we stumbled upon that strategy. I think it's like really important to explore your SLG motion early on before you're like a full-blown company with all these different teams and departments. And it was really easy to iterate. And all of us understood the PLG motion before we started to build SLG motion. So it was not really about cannibalization. It's very clear that we're speaking to a different customer here. They see value completely differently. The motion is entirely different. We're like more tops down. We have to talk to procurement. So we didn't really have a lot of the concerns or challenges of a traditional PLG company on this one.
So the answer is start small, and before you start
early.
Yeah, start early.
Yeah. And you need to have the same leaders across PLG and SLG. We started a finance team after this whole thing, and I actually landed on the finance team exactly for this reason, because we don't believe you can set up separate strategies when you're thinking about monetization and growing a business.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah, and now that you guys have evolved and grow immensely, we were talking earlier around this idea of credits being a currency. And I think this is a related fundamental. I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more. How do you guys value, like the value of a credit grows across different plans, for example, or with increased purchase? You mentioned a little bit about this tier pricing idea. Like if you can get a little bit more into that, I would love to hear.
Yeah. So I think you probably still start with the value that you're delivering for the customer, and it comes from really understanding who your buyers and users are. And for self-serve, I think majority of the customer actually use Clay for prospecting. So it is a little bit further away from revenue, right? And it's very experimentation heavy, and they really value having a lot of options and the ability to start very small. So the value prop is slightly different. And we move to enterprise, or as you like grow in different tiers, we give you more features that allow you to work with a bigger team or a more complex GTM stack with a lot more integrations, or scalability to run millions of rows with your CRM connection. So, right, once you have all of these additional features, the platform value increases and actually serve a completely different set of use cases and customers. So our classic enterprise use case, the first one is always CRM refresh, because these people have large CRMs that usually have stale data. And that's an immediately valuable use case that we can actually build an ROI around. So we really think about enterprise pricing based on the value that we're creating with all these features to the customer.
And what about like discounting as a strategy, like let's say for longer commitments or higher volume? How do you think this in relation to this currency?
Yeah. I tend to think the product conversation or like the UX conversation you have with your champion is very different from the procurement conversation you have, or the pricing conversation you have with procurement or finance. So we talked about like the feature, the value, how we convince champion. And then they're convinced they want to purchase the product. You have a volume. Then the next task is to figure it out with pricing, with finance and procurement. And it's pretty simple, really. I think the key is to keep it simple and reasonable. So we studied the business model of these data warehouse tools like Snowflake or Databricks, and they're all pretty similar. There are only two things matter when it comes to discount. One is the length of your commitment, so like the terms of your contract, and two is the size of your commitment. It really distills down to what matters here, and it doesn't like involve procurement going back to your champion and ask 100 questions about like, how does this feature work? What is the use case and ROI of this thing? You just goes to procurement, tell you this is the currency that we're selling, and there are these couple ways that we can save costs for you and manage scalable, like a scaled, predictable bill for you over time.
Going back to transparency as a key value. Amazing.
So the Clay founders have clearly always thought about margins from the get-go, right? And you've also been quite generous in what you give away. As you mentioned before, there's a free tier, usage pay-as-you-go model, very low priced first tier, unlimited seats. So driving adoption as well has been a huge goal for Clay, right? So why do you think these are both important at the same time? Because I feel like a lot of businesses still don't fully understand why adoption and profitable margins at the unit economics level are both critically important. So it'll be interesting to get your take on how Clay thinks about both of those coexisting at the same time.
Yeah. I think SaaS in the last 10 years had it better because there is not a lot of variable costs, right? There was no AI cost. You have 90+% gross margin. So adoption is obviously the
golden age of SaaS
for growth teams. Yeah. Versus I think now, because the cost is more meaningful, and especially for Clay, right? We sell a lot of data on the platform, and there is a meaningful variable cost for every credit that we sell. So we just have a lower margin of error to play with, which is super fun because now we get to get nerdy and like really think about the unit economics of things. And I think the goal is to grow sustainably over time in a way that is also fair to the customer. And if that's your principle, you can sort of design any new features or integrations from there pretty consistently.
Do you also then have sort of like a real-time dashboard of unit costs or something like that to help you know that, okay,
Absolutely.
This new feature didn't break the unit economics? Okay, awesome. That's pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
I think most.
We have two approaches. So one is sort of classic run-the-mill new integrations. I tend to think of it as, if you're OpenAI, you've been pricing like every new model, you price it in the same pricing model. You have like a very good framework that you can probably comfortably give it to engineers and PMs to implement. And as long as it follows the framework and you have a way to put in the checks and balances, it'll work. So at Clay, it's very similar. For new integrations, new data points, that's what we do. And that's where you get velocity without having finance or monetization PM step in at every step of the way. And then the second part is when you're launching a new product, we really get deep into the user experience. So, for example, Signals, which we launched this year, is a very different way of using Clay, because when you're like running a signal, the key is actually the timeliness of getting that signal. So setting up like a certain frequency actually is related to the value you're getting from the signal, even if you end up getting the same number of results. So that's a very different pricing model. And we had to work a lot with engineers, product, customers to really understand how they use it, how they see the value. And we iterate with a smaller group of customer. We track these analytics to make sure that we are getting enough adoption and we're protecting our unit economics, and we iterate and ship from there.
So monetization is almost a part of the product designing process, because you're presenting refresh rates, you're presenting recency, all of that into the product feature itself from the get-go. And that's fantastic. That's just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to start early for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's really amazing. And it's a great example of like, you don't need to pick acquisition or margins. You can grow sustainable and still grow. Like Clay is one of those few, like we see so many radical changes in just my monitor pricing. You're like, okay, that's what they're trying to optimize for right now, or that, like almost as a something they need to choose. Super interesting. If we think a little bit about the future of AI monetization and Clay in particular, I think a common critic that has come with the usage credit-based model has been this implication that it's often just like a cost-plus model. Like we're back to cost-plus, Why do you think that is? And how do you think Clay's own value-first approach will evolve in the coming years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm sure it's a billion-dollar question on a lot of people's mind. I think the jury is out, but my take here is it's probably a nature of how early we are with AI and a lot of these new usage-based pricing models. I think when you don't have a clear shared language with your customer in terms of what is creating the value, then you probably start from anchoring on the cost. And I think that's going to change over time, right? And hopefully the cost of AI is also going to decrease over time, so that AI gradually becomes like the same story as AWS or infrastructure cost, right? Like we don't pass on all our cloud service costs to our customers today because we know how to manage it, we know how to optimize it. And I think it's going to be the same over time with AI. Like right now, people are just trying to jump to the latest model and test the latest technology. And the users are paying the bill for it because it's cool and it's new. But I think over time, companies are going to differentiate with their ability to translate from the infrastructure layer to better services and user experience for the customer. And that's actually where you get to differentiate and price at a premium with a differentiated value.
Yeah.
And until then, keep an eye on that and on that unit economics, right? And make sure you're not in the red. Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think that can look for Clay, if you would guess any change?
Yeah, I think we're constantly thinking about how to improve our pricing model. I think a lot of it is we want to stay close to how our customers are using the tool. So if they perceive value closer to a cost plus model, where they want to see exactly how you're charging them, then providing more transparency and clarity and also providing analytics to guide them so they can forecast cost over time, that is a great strategy. And you don't need to be 2 steps ahead of your customer in terms of pricing product market fit, right? But I think over time, it is important to differentiate as a platform in terms of not just data, on top of the AI stuff, what is really different from Clay's platform and what are the orchestration value that we're providing to the customers. And I think that's really the long game of SaaS who are playing in the AI space.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
All right. So bringing us full circle, I'd like to close with where we began. I've been obsessing over the role of pricing PM for a while now. I've been one too. And now I'm building for others who fit into this role, right? I'm building product for others who are playing this role in their companies. Now, I've been curious, what are some weekly, daily artifacts or rituals that are central to your process as a pricing PM And how do you see this role changing as it becomes more important and ubiquitous?
Yeah, I think you kind of alluded to it. We look at dashboards a lot. And this is a habit from Asana where we would look at our entire self-serve funnel at least once, basically every Monday as a team. You always pick up super interesting information from just looking at the data. And I think it's extra important in the day of usage-based software, right? Like we have an AI P&L, we have an integration dashboard that we actually look at with engineers. And I think that's where the industry is going, is your engineering team need to also understand the unit economics of your product, and so that they can be really good partners and you can ship with velocity.
Awesome. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting to get the behind the scenes speak, Zona. Thank you for sharing everything that you did.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be part of this. And if you guys have any follow-up questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you. You get me excited with the job I do just by hearing you talk. Really fascinating.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it is very exciting to be thinking about monetization. I never thought it was like the thing that I would do. And when I tell people like I work on pricing, they're like, what is there to do? I'm like, oh my God, where do I start?
Right. I hate it. Yeah, I am right there with you, 100%.
I have a question for you, Zona, actually. Just one thing that just struck me. Do you have engineers mapped to you?
Do I have engineers mapped to me? Yes and no. I have the billing engineering team work with me. We don't have a billing PM, so I'm basically like the billing and monetization PM. But I'm not really fully in the product org because I think the project that we do in pricing is a little bit across all product teams. So I would work with, core foundational engineering team if we're shipping a big change in certain surfaces, and we would work with a new product team if we're launching a new business.
Got it.
It's that cross-functional flavor of doing pricing and monetization. I think you're the right.
Like we work extensive, maybe too much with the AI engineering team as well. And a lot of the work is not feature oriented. I think it's more infrastructure related. It's just to really understand how can we set you up for success over time. Like when I'm talking to the integrations team, it's not just like, how much are we going to price this one data points that we're adding? It's more so that like, hey, can we have a dashboard and can we have a good data tracking system and pipeline so that every time you add a new integration, there is like automated unit economics calculation baked in. And then over time, once we ship it, we can actually track it. So there's less friction internally when we're shipping things.
Makes sense. Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of course.